What I'm gonna do now is solder this end lug on here. And there we have a crimped and soldered homemade lug. I'll go test fit that and see how she looks. What's going on, guys? Today is going to be a little bit different of a video, more of a vlog style, and that's because, well, I'm just kind of working on my 95 Suburban here. Well, that's always convenient. Anyways, I'm going to be working on my 95 today, and it's because I feel like I have an issue or something needs to be adjusted with my electric fans. I know we're talking about electric fans again, but there's a reason. The reason is I've done a lot of work to this truck. I've had these fans in for a few years now, and I'm getting to the point where my whole intention with this truck was to build it up as an overlanding vehicle, right? To have a proper overlanding vehicle, you need something that really has great, fantastic reliability. A vehicle that you can absolutely be sure is not going to break down in any sort of way. And I haven't been so certain with that having these fans installed. Now, I've done a lot of work, like I said, in terms of doing the big 3 upgrade, big 4 upgrade. I mean, every single charge wire, negative ground wire, all of them have been changed. I've upgraded my alternator twice. I'm now sitting on a Mechman Elite 250. So I know for certain at this point that I do have adequate power charging that battery and running everything once, you know, obviously the truck is running. The alternator is great. It's the best I've had so far, and I'm really stoked with it. The problem comes on a really hot day like it's been here in California. Very hot out, over 100 degrees. I'll be driving my truck. I have the AC on inside, the front fan and the rear fan, and obviously my dual electric fans are running. And when I come up to a stoplight, my truck just seems to be idling really, really hard. Like, almost get the impression that it wants to quit or something wants to blow just because that idle is so rough. Just a very vibratory, it vibrates a lot in the truck, and it just doesn't feel right. So last night laying in bed, I'm like, man, what can I do to test it out, maybe make some adjustments before I make the ultimate decision to possibly remove these fans and reinstall the original clutch-driven fan. So I still have the instructions for the fans, the original instructions I got, and the troubleshooting guide for the variable speed controller here. I've read through them, and at this point I'm thinking that I can make a temperature adjustment for that variable speed controller. One thing I do notice when I'm driving around and, you know, my truck is up to temperature, and I use air quotes because I can see that obviously when the temperature rises and the thermostat opens and then the temperature goes back down, these fans work extremely well. And my overall temperature when I'm just driving around is somewhere down in like the 160 area. I feel like it's like way below what I think it should be on the gauge in the truck. So I'm assuming that the temperature setting is set a little too low. I'm pretty sure from what I was reading on these instructions before is that the variable speed controller is initially set at 185. Now that I think about it, I think my thermostat is a 195 degree thermostat. The variable speed controller is supposed to go from 60% on the fans to 100% over a 10 degree temperature difference. So that means if I go from 185 to 195, for example, the fans will be running at 100%. You can see right here is my temperature probe stuck into the fins of the radiator. It's located right where they say, right off of this upper radiator hose. So that should be good, getting a good accurate temperature from the radiator. So my assumption is this: maybe the temperature is set too low on the VSC and the fans are running at 100% when they really shouldn't be. Now, the whole reason why we're talking about this today is because ultimately, in terms of reliability and taking this truck out on a major adventure and not having to worry about a fuse blowing or something burning up, I'm kind of thinking that I want to reinstall the factory clutch-driven fan. I just feel like the factory, GM, knew what they were doing when they built these trucks, and therefore they probably know best that a clutch-driven fan is the best for this truck. Now, if I do go back to the clutch-driven fan, I do think in this area here, I would still employ a smaller singular electric fan, and that's just to help with the AC when it's on to cool down this condenser. If you look real close, there's my condenser covered in bugs. I gotta clean that off. And just behind it there is the actual radiator. I'm even curious if I could put a really slim fan on this radiator on this side and still install the clutch fan with the original shroud and everything and have it all fit like normal. So anyways, let's get started. I'm gonna start the truck, let it get up to temperature. That way I can test exactly when these fans kick on, and we can see if we can adjust the temperature, and maybe that's been somewhat of an issue, maybe not, I don't know, but the only way to know is to test. Okay, truck's on. So you can see here, I start the truck and obviously the fans aren't on, and that is by design because they don't need to be on right now. They only need to be on, number one, if the AC was on, number two, if it reaches temperature. One thing I totally love about having electric fans is all this space here. I plan on changing out this water pump very soon, so you can see how much space I have in order to be able to do that. Okay, the fans just came on. I could tell that the water pump, or the thermostat was open. Fans just turned on. I'm trying to figure out at what temperature this probe is sensing. On the back of this, right up by the probe, we got 186. The fans just turned off. Let's see what temperature we have. We're at about 189 on this, right next to that probe. Okay, now we're at about 195. And the fans aren't on. Okay, so in the truck, you can see my temperature gauge there, and that's about where it always stays, which seems really low. You can see that 210 number there. I don't really know what increments these little dashes are, but that does seem to be a bit low if 210 is right there in the middle. I'm assuming it should be somewhere, maybe just underneath that 210 mark. I think that's what it used to be before the electric fans. So I'm gonna try to adjust that temperature up on the VSC just a little bit. All right, well the fans are on and I'm sensing the temperature right next to the temperature probe. We're getting 177, about 180. So I don't know, maybe we're set about 10 degrees too low. Maybe the truck computer is sensing that the temperature is always a little too cool, and it's giving it a little more fuel or something, more than it needs. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out why this thing would be idling so rough, because right now it's fine. It's only when I'm in drive under load. Okay, so looking right here where it says variable speed control has new features, fans will come on at 60%. Basically says if your temperature is set to 185, then between 185 and 195, the fan speed will increase from 60% to 100%. So after a 10-degree rise from that set point, the fans will be running at 100%. It also says maximum rotation of adjusting screw is 3/4 of a turn. That screw right there. Inside this little hole right here is where the adjustment screw is. Okay, so I'm supposed to go clockwise with this thing. I'm gonna attempt that now. Hopefully I don't screw it all up. All right, so I just made a small adjustment, and the moment I made that adjustment, the fans turned off. Let's see what the temperature is now in the truck. All right, we can see that the temperature is pretty much the same as what it was before, but let's give it some time and see if it rises and at what temperature this thing keeps when the fans kick on. So the fans just kicked back on. Let's check the temperature inside the truck. Still pretty dang low. I gotta say, those fans pull a lot of air. Okay, so I'm gonna make one more adjustment here. The fans have kicked off on their own. I'm gonna adjust it up even a little more. Okay, the fans just kicked on. Let's see when I adjust it if they turn back off. Yep. Okay, I put it up just a little bit more. The fans have now turned off and they're back on. And once again, guys, the fans just kicked off, and you can see this temperature really hasn't changed here. I don't know, man. I've made 2 adjustments. The fans have kicked off while making the adjustment, telling me that the adjustment is working. The sensor is sensing that I'm turning up the temperature, the kick-on point. Maybe I just need to turn it all the way up and see what happens. Okay, so I did turn it up quite a bit. I don't know if I turned it all the way, but you can see we're hovering right around the maybe 205 mark. It's just before that 210 mark. Fans are not on right now, so we'll see when they kick on. Okay, I literally just turned the camera on to show you the temperature, and right as I did, the fans kicked on. So it looks like we're probably in the, I don't know, 220 range there, 225, which is definitely too high. But we'll see how low the temperature gets while the fans are running. Okay, I just flipped the camera back on because the fans just turned off. We just got below that 210 point. So I definitely have this temperature sensor set a little too high. I'm gonna turn it down just a little bit. I just put the truck in drive. I also turned the AC on. You can see this gauge here. We were sitting at about 100 degrees a second ago. So I just wanted to get some cooling in here while I'm sitting in here. This also gives me a good test to see how it's idling right now in drive with the truck up to temperature and the fans on. It's hot out here, guys. I'm inland California, and it's probably been 100 degrees plus the past like week. It's been very, very hot. So inside my garage, it's super stuffy. It actually is really humid here during this time too. And my AC has been struggling. So far with the truck in drive and the AC on, seems to be idling okay. It's not bogging down so much like it used to feel like. I wonder if that would change if I was out driving around, but right now, sitting right here in the garage, it seems to be idling okay in these conditions. I'm obviously not gonna be able to solve this right here and now in the garage. I'm gonna have to take some time, drive the truck around and really get a feel for the characteristics of the fans and everything now. Does seem to be idling a little rough. I mean, it's much rougher than my 03 Suburban or my wife's 05 Envoy, that's for sure. I'm just talking about in relation to the way this thing normally would idle. It still idles a little bit rough. The temperature seems to be up just a little bit from what it normally was sitting at before. Yeah, I don't know, guys. I just cranked the rear AC on full blast. I can feel a lot of air coming out. It's not quite cold yet, it's getting there, but it still does seem to be idling with that kind of rough idle. It's just not confidence inspiring. If I was to take this truck out on some trails, you know, far away from where any help can get to me, and my truck broke down over something like this, it would not be good. And if I know that there's issues, if I know the truck is having issues, why wouldn't I just take those issues completely away so I don't even have to deal with it? I'm kind of thinking that's the way I'm gonna go. All right, guys, so I know that you can test whether the fans are at 60% or not by grounding out terminal 6. The other end of this is hooked up to terminal 6, and I'm gonna touch it here. We can hear the difference between the fan sound before and after. Here we go. Yep, I just heard it kick up. So that's 100%. And that's actually off because they cycled off. Well, it definitely is refreshing to know that the VSC is still working properly, working as it was designed. I've had a lot of comments in the couple of videos that I made regarding these electric fans, all saying that I wired them wrong and that I should have used relays and all this stuff. I agree with you that obviously relays are a great thing to use if you don't have something like this variable speed controller. Now, I don't know which is better. I don't know if relays are far better than something like this variable speed controller. I just don't know. What I do know is that I didn't need relays because I did everything according to the directions, and this variable speed controller is the computer that controls the speeds at which the fans kick on and everything. If you don't know already, these fans are by Flex-A-Lite, and just a quick disclaimer, Flex-A-Lite gave me these fans to test and to make videos with years ago. It's been years, and I'm now at the point where I'm possibly going to be removing these just to have a little bit more reliability if I was out in the bush somewhere, not having to worry about something breaking down. But they have been working great for me. It's just that the truck bogs a little bit when I'm at a stoplight. All right, guys, here I'm sitting at a stop sign, just letting it idle in drive, and I wanted to show you a couple things. So right here we have our voltage, which is just below the 14 mark, but it should be up in the mid 13s, somewhere around there. That's what I've seen it so far. My temperature seems to be pretty stable at just below that 210 mark, although I do have the AC blasting right now on full blast, max everything, as well as this rear AC on medium. And so far, everything seems to be idling okay. If we look at our idle, we're about 600 RPMs. Temperature seems to be in a great spot. I do want to mention though, with the AC on, the fans are constantly on with the compressor. So I'm curious if I turn this off and sweat a little bit, what this temperature is going to do. Let's test it out. Okay, we have no AC. I just heard the fans turn off. So let's drive around a little bit again and see what that temperature does. Okay, so I'm not liking this. The temperature is getting pretty decently high and the fans haven't kicked on yet. So I'm gonna have to adjust it down just a little bit. All right, so with all of that adjustment, I have the AC on now, by the way. The air that's coming out of there is about 50 degrees, so it feels a lot better than 100 degrees. With all of that adjustment, I'm sitting here in drive, AC on front and back. It's still idling rough. It seems odd, like it shouldn't be idling this rough. It's not terrible. It's not like it's an untuned idle, it's just a rough vibration. I don't know if that's due to the amperage that the alternator needs to produce in order to run the fans while I'm in drive, and maybe my RPMs are a little bit lower while in drive, because when I'm in park it seems to idle just fine. And it makes me think that I just need to stop messing with it, take the fans out, put the original clutch fan back in, and go from there. The last thing I'm going to do here, and I don't think it's gonna make a difference, but only because I have it, I'm gonna use the last of my cable here. This is the welding wire that I had bought and changed everything over to. You can see the alternator here, the wire that runs directly off the back of the alternator all the way over to the positive side of the battery is this same welding wire. I also used it everywhere else I could, like adding extra ground wires like that one there. Lots of it for different grounding wires everywhere on the engine, which you can see. And in case you don't know, the casing of an alternator is actually its ground. So you can see here, I've even added a 2-gauge welding wire as a ground directly to the negative side of the battery from the casing of the alternator. So the only place left for me to add that 2-gauge welding wire is from the positive side of the battery to this fuse panel here. This is the current wire I'd be replacing, and I believe this is 4-AUG or 4-gauge. And you can see there is a little difference there, but what's weird is it doesn't seem like much. And this is why I've never changed it out, because I felt like this red wire that I have was big enough. But just to make it the same as all the others, I'm gonna go ahead and switch it out. I'll keep this red wire on hand just in case I ever need it, but at least I'll know that every single last wire is the same exact size. I like to make my own terminals because it's cheaper. You cut your piece the right length, you cut the jacket off of your wire, and then this copper tubing will hopefully just slip right over your wire. I then put it in this hammer crimper. I take my BFH and smash this thing to crimp this copper tubing onto the wire. Once properly crimped, it should look something like that. And lastly, we're using this vise to clamp down the end of the lug and make it flat, just like you'd find on a store-bought lug. What I'm gonna do now is solder this end lug on here. And there we have a crimped and soldered homemade lug. All we got to do is drill a hole the size we need it and maybe trim up some of the edges. If you can see that line right there, I marked that based off of where we're going to be mounting it. So all I got to do is punch a hole here right in the center of that line. All right, I'll go test fit that and see how she looks. All right, it looks like we're fitting perfectly. And there is our finished 2-gauge wire with our custom lug and some heat shrink. Okay, everything's back together. We have our new charge wire that goes all the way to the main fuse relay panel here. You can see it right there, fits perfectly. I put the plastic wire covering on this one from the other wire. It doesn't quite fit, but I figured it'd offer a little bit more protection, you know, for situations like this. So before I go ahead and zip tie all these things back together, I'm gonna start it up and make sure it works. Now, I don't know if that was worth doing, if that did anything. It couldn't have hurt anything. I essentially doubled the wire size there going to that main fuse relay panel. Maybe I should have done that a long time ago. I did it now, so let's take it out on a drive and see if it changed anything. All right, after all that, we are sitting practically exactly where we were sitting when I first started this video. I've upgraded that charge wire. We've made some fine tuning with the VSC. It's idling rough just like it was before. So I've done everything I could possibly think to do. I've upgraded the charge wire, like I said, to a proper size. It probably should have been like that from the beginning. I went from 4-gauge, which is plenty thick, to 2-gauge. I'm not running any subs or anything else other than these electric fans. I can't imagine that being any sort of issue, you know, with this truck idling in drive so rough. It's really a rough idle, it really is. It's uncomfortable, it makes you feel like the car is gonna die. It is what it is. I know that from the testing I was doing earlier, as I was driving around without the AC on, the truck idles nice and smooth. I'm gonna have to take them out. I think that's my only option to get this thing to idle properly. And then I can do some more research and possibly add another auxiliary fan for the air conditioning system when that kicks on. Maybe something that pulls less amperage, something a little smaller. I don't know. That's kind of my thought process, my plans. If you guys have any other thoughts on this matter, please feel free to comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. My alternator is plenty strong to run these fans. They only pull about 30 amps when running at full blast. The rest of my vehicle also obviously pulls some amperage, but like I said, this is my third alternator. I started with the original, I went to a 140 amp, and now I'm at a 250 Elite by MechMan, and those suckers are great alternators. So this alt, it has plenty of juice. It's just, I don't know if it's maybe just the rest of the system, the way it's designed. You know, my truck has just not been designed to run two monster, 15-inch fans. Even if they are only running at 60%, it's just a lot of amperage to be running, I guess, while I'm in drive, and my RPMs drop just a little bit. I don't know. Well, I got to run into Costco. I'm going to end this video now. Thanks for watching, guys. If you're still watching, hit that thumbs up. Subscribe if you're not already. I'm Jimmy for One Road. I will see you in the next one.